when do I start and how do I start? Where do I start?
Now, Kevin, I do have some sad news report. I haven't heard anything from Kevin Costner at all.
Oh, God.
I've continued to
come
not
on.
hear anything.
Kevin, where are you? We got to
So
combine our
back,
accounts.
This
Come
goes
on.
back to sharing accounts,
Yeah.
thinking about relationships and
Yeah.
money and everything like that. And so I said to Kevin, well, we're trying to think of other famous Kevins, and Kevin Costner, of course, comes up.
Yeah.
So,
Of course.
But sadly, have not
I
heard
offered
from
to
anyone.
share my account with him. To
Oh, you
open
did?
up a joint account.
Well, that's
with.
very kind.
I know.
Yeah.
I thought it would be fair.
Man,
Yeah.
we got to
Nothing yet.
find out who's on his Twitter and get this sent over. You know,
Yeah.
to,
So
yeah.
Kevin
Exactly.
Costner, if you're
Get it
interested
on
in
his
coming
radar.
on Mitten Money, please let
Yeah.
us know.
Right.
That's right.
But besides the point, thank you for making the trek up from Lansing, Ben.
Happy to do it anytime. Good to see
Yeah.
you guys.
Yeah.
We have a very important topic that I think doesn't get a lot of limelight. And then I think, too, from a lot of people's perspective, and part of the reason why we also started Mitten Money, business owners are so busy, so
Right.
conflicted with what they do each and every single day that there's so much that can get caught on the wayside and really left on the margin to where important topics don't get brought up, like succession planning.
Right.
And so
Right.
we really want to go have an episode to go highlight about this. And of course, you're an expert within this and have a designation, the SEPA. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. Yep. I'm one of two SEPAs in our organization, so Certified Exit Planning Advisor.
Yeah.
And just as you say, well, I mean, you absolutely hit the nail on the head because I get asked the question all the time, well, why? Why is this such a problem? Why aren't business owners spending more time on this? And it's just as you described that for the business owner, of course I'm painting with a broad brush here, but, who's actively managing and running their company,
Right.
it's putting out the daily forest fire, you know, of what they're dealing with. And as I've said many times, the problem without a due date is a really hard problem to solve. And we see that a lot, even in the core day-to-day that we do at TriStar.
Yeah.
I mean, think about meeting with a client, doing their review or their financial planning and saying, hey, you guys haven't done your estate planning yet. You need to do that.
Yeah.
Is it important? Yes. Is it urgent? No. So what happens next year when you meet with them again and you ask, it hasn't moved forward.
Yeah.
The SEPA designation is through an organization called the Exit Planning Institute, and they do a state of owner readiness survey every single year and have for more than 10 years now. And the question for business owners of, do you believe that a succession plan is important for you personally as well as the long-term success of your business? Between an agree and strongly agree, over 95% every year.
Yeah.
But then the question of, have you done evaluation of your company in the last 2 years? 60% no. Do you have a formal transition plan in place? 80% no. So have you done any actual succession planning at all? It's about 50-50. Is it important? Yes. Have you done it? No. Why? Just like the estate plan. It's the important but not urgent issue.
Yeah.
That many times is a difficult one to start.
Yeah. So why is it important to get started, and how soon should someone get started? I mean, if I'm 5 years into my business, am I thinking about this? If I'm at what point should I start thinking about it and planning for it?
It's a fantastic question. Arguably, it's the most important question. Okay? When do I start and how do I start? Where do I start? So when do we start? Let's start there. So Will, you've been working for TriStar for how many years?
About 9 or 10.
About 9 or 10 years. Okay. You started at TriStar, filled out your HR paperwork, on the first days. You signed up for the company 401k, and I'm guessing you said, yep, give me the match. Your paycheck is pulling out, money eventually for Social Security, Medicare, those type of things, right? When you're contributing to your 401k, you are planning for your eventual exit from the workforce, even if that's going to be 45 years. And typically for this is another study that the Exit Planning Institute talks about. Think about the day-to-day client at TriStar, somebody who W-2 wage-earning employee, hard worker for a long career. They're preparing to retire. We're helping them through that transition. Think about their net worth, their overall net worth statement on average. It's a combination of financial assets and non-financial assets, right? They have equity in a house. They might have a place up north. And for the financial assets that they have, those are likely in a company 401k that's in a target date fund that's well diversified with good asset allocation. That's your normal W-2 wage earning employee that's been planning for this since the day they started. Now let's think about your business owner and their net worth statement. Many times 80, 90% of the business owner's net worth is tied up in a single security.
Right.
That's highly illiquid. It's difficult to value. You could argue then that the business owner should be doing more planning than that kind of everyday W-2 wage earning employee walking down the street.
Right.
So when should they start? Here's what I say. The day you start your business is the day you should plan for your eventual exit. That you should be thinking about your business not just in terms of profitability, which I get it, got to make payroll next Friday. And again, the hottest burning forest fire of the day, those are the things the business owner is by nature going to think of. But thinking about these bigger picture things and thinking about it right away. Because as we stress, and I think part of the challenge ends up being the vocabulary that we use, even when we say exit and succession planning. When I have that dialogue with an owner, here's the thing I hear 50% of the time. That's important, but I'm not ready to sell.
Right.
And there's another phone call I got once from someone I had been sharing the importance of this with for a long time and said, hey, Ben, I'm finally exiting. I'm closing next week. We should get together. I want to know what tax ideas you have.
Yeah.
Not a lot. There's no magic wands at that point, but you understand. And so when should we start? It has nothing to do with when you're ready to exit. It's, as we say, succession planning, exit planning is just good business strategy, because many of the things that we talk about as we spend time on it ultimately are de-risking the business. It's just good business planning. So, start early.
Right.
Yeah.
And so as you think about things that could potentially increase or decrease the value of the business, what are some of the more commonalities? It's easy to, of course, to think about this is the real estate. This could be the equipment, this is the cash on hand, but I'm sure there's probably some intangibles that are kind of thrown in there as someone takes a look at, hey, this is what my business could be worth. And maybe this is what it should be worth, but maybe I'm not considering all those building blocks.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to answer that, and I'm actually going to tie it in too to kind of part of a question for Kevin's that I didn't answer. The where do I start? What's the first thing I do? Well, as with most things, the place you start is at the beginning. A lot of business owners, when you go down this path and start the initial discussions of the importance of exit succession planning, they want to start at the end. They want to say, well, I'm going to transition to my daughter, who's, she's running the company. I got it from my father, and I'm going to transition it to my daughter. Or, I've got this competitor, but we're kind of friendly and we've talked about it that, so we're going to be a merger. I have a partner and they're going to buy me out. Here's where we start with there. That's the end. That's the outcome. You need to start with where you are today and at the beginning. And it gets back to two things. One, the thing that we do all the time, which is personal financial planning for the owner. What do you need out of the business? What are your goals? This is no different than financial planning we would do with any client, who's preparing for retirement. What do you want that next chapter to look like? What do you want your legacy to look like? What are your goals? What are your needs? What do you have? What are your debts? And then you build that financial plan. But because such a big piece typically of the owner's net worth is in the value of the company, that's the other piece, is that we need to do evaluation. We need to understand where you are today.
Right.
This could be a whole discussion for its whole segment, so we'll be brief. But with evaluation, when I say that, I'm not talking about an appraisal that Treasury would accept, for an estate or part of a divorce or something like that. But you need a general understanding, the business owner does, of two things. One, what your business is likely worth today. But two, and I argue this is more important, is why is it worth what it's worth today? In other words, what's driving my value? Why is my construction company that's $10 million in revenue, $2 million in EBITDA, a 4 times multiple? Why am I worth $8 million, but this other company over here is worth 12? Sure. Why are they a 6 time multiple and I'm a 4?
Sure.
That is key. And those are the drivers to value, to get to your question, Will. And that's a huge part of what we teach, is to educate on those things that drive value and why they drive value.
Right.
I'll give you a couple examples there. 2 companies, Company A and Company B. Let's just stick with construction. Okay. Both $2 million in EBITDA, both $10 million in revenue. Company A, their biggest customer that they have on a reoccurring basis represents about 5% of revenue.
Okay.
Okay. Well diversified with a lot of different companies. They'll have a lot of reoccurring contract business that they have. Company B, their biggest customer is 70% of the revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Which one would you buy?
Company A.
Yeah. Well diversified.
Another example. So that's kind of the customer revenue concentration. It's a big driver
Sure.
of that. Is that always easy to change? No. If you're company B, am I saying to go move away from that big customer? No.
Right.
But you need to be aware that is affecting your multiple. Someone's
Sure.
going to pay less for that reoccurring revenue or that EBITDA than someone else's.
Yeah.
Another example, company A, I love this question to an owner. Could you leave tomorrow
Right.
unannounced for 3 months? And what would that look like?
Right.
If company A owner says, absolutely, I do it all the time. I've got the right management team. I got the right people in the right seats on the bus. You know, they check in with me on important hires or fires or big client issues. But other than that, no, I can be gone. Owner B says the wheels would come off in 3 days.
Yeah.
I'm the only one who has these 3 key customer relationships. I drive all the sales. I'm the only one who knows how to do this. Which one would you buy? If you're removing the owner, that's an issue we call owner dependence.
Right.
A lot of times with these transitions, you have to get an HR professional involved to say, do you actually have a management team, that can transition? There can be a company with positive EBITDA that is not transferable.
Right.
There is no value because without the owner there, it falls apart.
Right.
The other things, and I won't spend time on these, but structural operational things. Can you pass an audit? Do you have good systems in place? Do you have good processes and procedures, or is it all in someone's head?
Yeah.
Brand capital, we can spend time on that. Is your company well thought of? Is your brand well respected and well thought of versus the opposite? So those are the things, and it is far more art than science. It's not, if this, then this, but as you actually move through the process, as a company were to go through due diligence, these are the big things that come up that tremendously affect value.
Yeah.
What do you think typically trips people up as you think about, I could easily see people possibly being more owner dependent, but would you think that's an easy, of course, given enough time, a lot of problems can be fixed. What are the most common problems that you typically will run into?
Well, I think that the owner dependence one, let's just go with that because it is so common.
Yeah, it seems very prevalent.
It's so prevalent.
Yeah.
And of course it would be. I mean, again, let's think of
the company.
It's your baby. It's
absolutely right. And I mean, think of the mindset of somebody who goes into being a business owner, right? You are risk tolerant. You're comfortable with that type of risk. You are constantly putting out the daily forest fire. Hey, boss, I got a problem. What do I do? You're a decision maker. You're effective.
Yeah.
So by nature, that type of a person who's an effective business owner, it becomes really easy to not delegate. It becomes really easy to do all these things on your own. And so that has to be a conscious decision. Sometimes when those things are identified, the transitions to fix them are very complicated. Sometimes not.
Right.
Sometimes and this is when you can get involved early enough. Someone says, hey, I know that I want to exit this company within the next 5 to 10 years. Also, I'll say 5 years in this is like this.
The comment.
Oh my gosh, it's comical. I'm like 2 weeks from Money Pit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, so someone says 5 years. If we have 5 years, that's a nice amount of time to work to transition some of these things in a really intentional way, and getting the owner to think in terms of value-based decisions, not just profit-based decisions. Is profit important? Clearly it is, because it's one of the two things that are multiplied together to get your value.
Sure.
But as I say all the time, like I'm yet to meet a business owner that doesn't go to work every day thinking about how to drive EBITDA and profit.
Right.
Most of them, can I drive revenue? Can I manage expenses? Those are the types of things that end up being that piece. It's the multiple side that can be driven, and sometimes relatively easily. Look, spending time with an HR professional of really, let's build out you as the owner, your job description. What are all the things that you do? Now, what are the things that you really have to do? What are the things that somebody else could do? You might have someone here that's ready for it. And quite honestly, if you want to retain them, this is a great time to elevate them, to take them, have them start taking on some of that work.
Yeah.
And many times I've seen HR professionals say, you know what your job is? To go leave for 3 months. And let's see if we can do it when you get to a certain point. So that helps value.
Yeah. No, I think what you brought up is really an underappreciated quality of many leaders is the ability to delegate.
No doubt about it.
And to let people fail.
Guilty.
Right?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have to let
As
people.
leaders,
There are
yeah.
times I've literally, not that I'm perfect by any stretch, but there are times I've let people make mistakes, even though
Yeah.
you want to save them. But I just figure, you know what? I'm going to let them make the mistake, and then
Right.
hopefully they'll learn from it and won't make it again next time. But
Right. Absolutely.
yeah, really. So, tell us about a business that has done a really good job, and maybe one that you had struggled, and what the differences looked like, and how you were able to help.
Yeah, I'll give a couple examples, of course, anonymously. One, I'll give the one that comes to mind, just because it's the kind of the sadder story. Because I drove by it yesterday. Was a guy that I knew owns a jewelry company. Okay, a small independent jeweler in a local mid-Michigan town. Known him for a long time. Bought most of my wedding rings from there. Anyway, he was getting ready to retire, and he was getting ready to leave the business. And I saw it on social media that he had posted liquidation sale. Everything must go. Going out of business sale. I'm gonna. Which you see that sometimes. I reached out to him because he had a familiar name. He had a storefront that people knew. A lot of reoccurring customers, and I said, you need to pause this for a second. Your business is worth more than the inventory you're liquidating. You need to recognize that. Ben, it doesn't work like that now. The Foxes, the malls, it's too hard to compete with the big guy. And so he went on his path and, liquidated the inventory he could and closed his doors. It happens sometimes.
Yeah.
It's an exit option, orderly liquidation. It's an exit option. It absolutely is. 6 months later, in the suite, in the little retail strip center that he operated out of, guess what business was operating out of that store?
Yeah.
A new jeweler.
Right.
Under a new name. For that jeweler with an unrecognizable name, he'd been in this community for 20 years under the name.
Yeah.
You don't think that jeweler would have bought? There was some value. Again, brand capital, you know? So again, it's just one of those things that one of the things I've learned is many times business owners believe that their method of exit has to be the way they originally entered the business.
Yeah.
I was a family transition, so it's got to be a family transition. I started a store from scratch and bought my inventory. That's what the next person's good,
Yeah.
Versus thinking about you need to be educated on all the options that are out there. And all of those options might not be a fit for you. They won't. There's some that aren't going to work based on your size and different factors. But anyway, that was a sad story.
Sure.
A positive story I'll share is a client who has a construction company, nice company, and had met with him several times and asked, what's your plan, for your exit and transition. But nobody wants to buy this business. I got a bunch of knuckleheads that work for me. We got a lot of equipment.
Yeah.
Over time, I'll just kind of, bid a little higher on jobs. The ones we get, great. The ones we don't, we'll shrink down, kind of shrink staff over time. And then at some point, I've got a lot of equipment and it's probably worth X. And that's my plan. And I said, okay, that is an exit option. And it has a name. Again, it's called orderly liquidation of assets. What a bank would do if you were failing and they had to, sell off the pieces of the collateral. But you've been doing this for 40 years and you've got some customers that don't even quote you anymore. You don't think there's value to that? So I said, give me an opportunity of a day. This is what we did. And we've done this in a couple cases with people just to educate. That's what we do is we educate. And had him meet with a couple of different professionals that played a variety of roles in the exit planning process. Some transaction professionals, some others, more consultants, things like that, just to educate. Again, when I asked him, what's your timeline, by the way, what did he say? How long?
5 years.
5 years. That's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
So we met. He went through some meetings and he learned what the process was in terms of actually going to market. If you're going to go through a process, if you're large enough, I'm not talking about like a brokerage transaction kind of Main Street deal, but if you're actually going to go through an investment bank or an M&A advisor, he learned what that was. But I think more importantly, what it wasn't. Yeah. The old Wall Street movie from the 80s, you buy a company, you sell it apart. That's not, but that's what's in a lot of owners' minds. You know? When he learned that and he became educated, after the last meeting, sat with him and said, okay, what do you think? Or, And I'll never forget him sitting back and saying, I want to be done last week,
Wow.
you know, and said, you know, then he said, well, you know, Ben, who do you think I should work with? Well, we won't answer that question. I will introduce you to different people that provide different roles, but I'm not picking it for you. We don't have a dog in that fight. You know, I think that's one of the things that makes our approach very unique and very helpful is that we are agnostic to your method of exit and we're agnostic to who you work with.
Yep.
We build a significant network of professionals that can help depending on what your path is. But again, it's, you know, you're going to make that decision. Yeah. And so he did go to market with a professional, and they're through due diligence, they're through what's called quality of earnings, and they're likely to close, you know, here in the near future at 4 to 5 times what he was prepared to get out of liquidating his company.
Yeah.
And again, all we do is educate. You know, we take the fear away. We make sure that the owner is prepared to make good decisions. As our friend Dawn says, you know, we don't make decisions. We make recommendations. You make decisions. We provide information. That's all we do.
Yep. Yeah. What are some of the things, so like in that case or in any case when a business owner is going through a sale like that, what should they prepare for? Because I know it's not always pleasant.
Correct. Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one we lean into heavily when we walk alongside an owner through the process. So, number one, the first thing I say, this isn't selling a house.
Yeah.
Everyone sold a piece of real estate. Right? This is not the same.
Yeah.
Which it's fair, right? I mean, if you think about the buyer, they're really not buying. There might be tangible assets that come with them, but the tangible assets value is just what those tangible assets can produce in terms of EBITDA or cash flow or SDE, depending on the business. But that's what those pieces are worth. So if you're buying cash flow, and that can vary tremendously from year to year, you need to understand what you're buying. You need to understand what the risks are. So if we think about, again, I'll go to the house example, what an inspection is like on a house. We've done those before. You walk around with someone, they kick the tires and check the furnace, and they're out in an hour. You know, due diligence is thorough. Yeah. It is exhausting. It is, it's expensive. I prepare them for that. You need to understand that, you know, that selling or exit, I don't want to say selling because that is only one of several exit options, but transitioning or exiting your business is likely the second most important decision you'll ever make regarding your business, the first being starting it.
Sure.
So to think that you should go through that process as cheaply as possible is a flawed decision. Right. You need to be prepared that you need the right professionals at the table to help you. If you don't know who they are, that's where you need to work with someone that can help you identify, hey, is my attorney the right attorney for the transaction? Is my CPA the right CPA for the transaction? So again, that's one, that it is long, it is painful. It's expensive. Yeah. It's many times exceptionally tedious. I mean, booklets of questions of things that you're like, you know, is this really something someone needs? Yeah, they probably do. Yeah. That's one. The second one I'll give you, and the final, is one that I've learned a few times coming through, and that is that almost all times when we're working with an owner that's going through this process of exiting their business, and if they're selling and if they're going to market and if they're going through this kind of a process with a M&A advisor, investment banker, this is likely the only time they've ever done it and will ever do it.
Right.
They're new to it. The buyer likely isn't. The buyer is likely a professional in this space, whether they're part of a family office or private equity fund, or many times more commonly what's called an independent sponsor, somebody who has those relationships with the money, but they're more there to find the opportunity and bring it forward. This is what they do, and they make their money on the buy side.
Right.
And I don't want to make this come off sounding manipulative, but this is one thing I really lean into in terms of the preparation with an owner is what I call owner exhaustion.
Okay.
And you get to a point through a process, you are beat up and you're dragged out and you're tired. And especially when the end is in sight.
Yeah.
I've seen examples where significant change happens in that closing, last couple yards before the end zone. and changes happen. And I feel, this is not fact, this is how I feel, that at times this is a very experienced buyer.
Oh, sure.
Being very familiar with the owner exhaustion that's taking place and significant changes that come down the pipeline. Having good people around you, your attorney, your CPA, your financial planner, if you have kind of a person walking alongside you through this process to help coach you off the ledge. Had a situation where somebody was going through a process, and I think the closing was later that week, and the deal went to change dramatically in terms of structure.
Wow.
Not necessarily price, but cash at close,
Sure.
owner taking a lot more debt, and had the owner literally say to me, I'm just done.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm just done.
I just want to be done.
I just want to be done with this whole transaction. And you've got to have the support network around you to be able to, you got to be ready to walk away if you have to, or come to find out that this is a tactic, and this is something happened. So the client I told you about again that was going to liquidate his company, he and I had this conversation because I had seen it from somebody else. And that would have been last fall when he and I had this conversation. I just warned him about, be prepared as you go eyes wide open.
Yeah.
That this could happen. And it did.
Yeah.
And he I had forgotten the conversation that we had, and we were talking on the phone. He goes, you told me that this was going to happen, and it did. And I felt so prepared and empowered to be able to say, then don't buy it. I'll go back to market. If you don't, and you have, it is a negotiation, and you have to have the right people in your corner.
Right.
So.
And just like you said, like with a house inspection, right? One side, the owner of the house is trying to retain value.
No doubt
the buyer of the house is trying to reduce value because everybody wants a deal.
Yeah.
And it's about coming up with a fair compromise for all parties, right?
Exactly.
So we're all familiar with it. Like when you go to buy a car, right?
Yeah.
The
kick a tire.
salesman's trying
and,
to get as much price out of it as they can, and you're trying to get the best deal you can. And both parties have to recognize that there's a win-win.
Yeah.
And not give up. If the one side gives up, it's a win for just one side. So.
And again, in this situation, you have unequally experienced parties.
Sure.
The buyer who knows what they're doing, and the seller likely not. Again, that's why the seller needs the right professionals around them. Yeah, that support network.
And so, Ben, as a great closing question for you, what do you think would be the best, besides from reaching out from yourself, some other professionals as well, what would be the first perfect step just to get someone, all right, I want to go do something. I want to go make a plan. Like, what's the best first step to actually help someone get over that, maybe initial fear? Because when you think about, successful exits, successfully leaving the business they started, it's a pretty emotional decision.
No doubt about it. Absolutely. Yeah. Again, we work with retirees all the time. And in that first year of retirement, people struggle because this was a 40-hour, those were my family. It was a big, and we see people struggle.
Sure.
Now, again, think of the business owner who, I like the saying that, being a business owner is great because you only have to work half a day. And you get to pick which 12 hours that is.
Right.
That if you started this is your baby. You think you can go from that to just playing a little more golf and Wordle, you're going to be miserable.
Yeah.
So it is a really emotional decision down the stretch as well.
Yeah.
So to your question about where to start again, start at the beginning. Learn, become educated.
Yep.
Don't focus at this time in terms of the method of exit. That is something to learn about. And again, working with a professional like us or someone else that they have, understand all of your options, but that's not first. What's first is understand where I am today. What is the value of my company? Have I done a comprehensive financial plan? How much do I need out of the value of my company?
Right.
My company might be worth 10 million. But if I do my financial plan and I only need 6, then what am I waiting for? And that happens all the time. Versus I need 10. It turns out my goal is I need 15. Well, then we need to make some changes,
Right.
But you need to understand where you are today. And I really, really strongly encourage people, not just TriStar, but work with a party that is objective to the outcome.
Sure.
So there are wonderful, wonderful transaction professionals that we work with, from a brokerage standpoint, M&A standpoint, professionals that work even in the, employee transition, ESOP world or whatever the case might be. They will do, exit planning. But again, they also have an outcome in mind.
Sure.
And so when you work with a professional that doesn't care how you exit, that's where do you start? become educated.
Yeah.
Understand all those things, understand where you are, and then as you build your team around you, you can fill in the blanks. So,
So for a small business, just real quick, for a small business owner that's thinking about this, like, wow, this sounds like a lot of time and cost. And can somebody just call up and have an hour conversation, like a consult to just get an idea of where they are? And
absolutely. Yeah. That's a great question, Kevin. I should clarify. When I say the cost, be prepared to spend.
Sure.
I'm talking about when the transaction is happening at the end, whether it's going to market, employee transition, partner buyout, family transition. That's the other one I hear all the time, by the way. Well, I don't need this because it's a family transition. Those can be the most complicated many times. Kids in the businesses, kids not, what's fair.
Yep.
But either way, the initial consultations don't need to be expensive at all. Just learn, become educated.
Yep.
There's a lot of reading out there that you can do. A lot of great books on the topic.
Anything in particular you would suggest offhand?
Yeah, there's a book called Walking to Destiny that I think does a really great job. Keys into business owners on a number of things that they need to be educated as they think through the process. And again, what it really leans into is that the things that you would do to prepare yourself for exit, even if that exit is far in the future, are just good business planning ideas. Shows you the process in terms of starting with the financial plan, understanding the valuation. What are the drivers to value? How do you do that? It goes really deep into if you have that time in front of you.
Sure.
What are the types of things that you could do? But it's a great read. It's got good examples. Talks about what a critically important issue this is too. I mean, when you think about baby boomers and the number of them out there and the number of businesses that are left to transition, it's quite staggering.
Okay.
So.
Great.
Well, perfect. Well, thanks, Ben, for coming up. This was a fun conversation. Do you mind if we leave your contact info in the episode details?
By all means.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. And thank you, everyone, for listening to another great episode of Mitten Money. Until next time.